Ecclesiastes 1:18 states, "For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow." This declaration from the preacher, traditionally identified as Solomon, is one of the deepest and most thought-provoking statements in the Bible. To fully understand it, we must consider the context of the book of Ecclesiastes, the author's life experience, the meaning of wisdom and knowledge from a biblical and philosophical perspective, and how this truth manifests in our daily lives. The book of Ecclesiastes is a philosophical and existential treatise that examines the human condition and the search for the meaning of life. Unlike other parts of Scripture that emphasize hope and God's promises, Ecclesiastes takes on a more melancholic and realistic tone. Solomon, known for his extraordinary wisdom, writes this book in his old age, reflecting on all that he has experienced. He had immeasurable wealth, power, pleasure, and deep knowledge of the world, but concludes that all these things are in the end vanity, a term that can be translated as futility, emptiness, or illusion. When he declares that in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow, he is pointing to a profound paradox of the human condition. Normally, we think of wisdom as something desirable and knowledge as a tool for progress and happiness. However, Solomon realized that the more we understand about life, the more we are confronted with the reality of an imperfect world full of injustice, suffering, and human limitations. One key aspect of this statement is that knowledge and wisdom bring with them a heightened awareness of the corruption and transience of existence. An ignorant person may live without worrying about the big questions of life, simply enjoying immediate pleasures and accepting the world as it is. But the one who delves into understanding reality sees its flaws. They realize that time is relentless, human achievements are fleeting, justice is often not served, evil prospers, and in the end everyone dies. This realization can lead to frustration, anguish, and even despair. Furthermore, wisdom exposes the burden of responsibility. Someone who understands more about life feels compelled to act differently, to bear the weight of making more complex decisions, to deal with moral dilemmas, and to try to change what is within their reach. This burden can be exhausting, as the wise person often realizes that despite their efforts, there are things beyond their control. Thus, the grief mentioned in the verse refers to the emotional and spiritual weariness that accompanies the expansion of awareness. Another essential point is that the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, when done without God, can be a path of great frustration. Science and philosophy provide answers to many questions, but they cannot fill the existential void of the human soul. Solomon, even being one of the wisest men in history, recognized that human wisdom is limited. He explored all the avenues of intelligence and reason, but realized that without God, knowledge only highlights our fragility. The human mind, no matter how brilliant, cannot fully comprehend God's purposes or find ultimate meaning without God's revelation. This truth is reflected in many aspects of modern life. Today we have access to an unprecedented amount of information. We can learn about almost any subject with just a few clicks. However, contemporary society faces alarmingly high levels of anxiety, depression, and hopelessness. Part of this is due to the fact that information alone does not bring peace. On the contrary, the excess of knowledge often overwhelms youth with concerns, uncertainties, and a sense of powerlessness in the face of global crises, political conflicts, and the moral decay of the world. Human beings were not made to bear the weight of understanding all things alone. Therefore, without a solid faith and trust in God's sovereignty, knowledge can become an unbearable burden. In light of this reality, what should our stance be? The book of Ecclesiastes itself points to the way at the end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Ecclesiastes 12:13. This means that true wisdom is not just in acquiring knowledge, but in recognizing our limitations and trusting in God. Knowledge without faith leads to anguish, but knowledge, combined with obedience and reverence for the Lord, brings peace and purpose. Therefore, when we reflect on Ecclesiastes 1:18, we should understand that Solomon is not discouraging the pursuit of wisdom, but warning us about the challenges it brings. We should seek understanding, but always with humility, knowing that there are things only God can reveal. We should use knowledge for good, but without being consumed by frustration over things we cannot change. And above all, we should remember that the most important wisdom is not intellectual, but spiritual, the kind that leads us to a deep relationship with God and gives us hope beyond the limitations of this passing world. Psalm 111:10 teaches us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow his precepts have good understanding. To him belongs eternal praise. This passage reminds us of a fundamental truth that perfectly complements the reflection proposed in the text. On Ecclesiastes 1:18, while Solomon, in his search for wisdom and knowledge, reveals the limitations of human understanding and the burdens that wisdom can bring, the psalm points us to the key that transforms this search into something edifying: the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord, as presented in this psalm, is not a paralyzing fear, but a deep respect and reverence for God, recognizing his sovereignty, infinite wisdom, and power. This fear leads us to understand that no matter how vast human knowledge is, and despite the answers that science and philosophy may provide, there is a greater truth that transcends our ability to comprehend. By placing God at the center of our pursuit of understanding, we are called to recognize that he is the ultimate source of wisdom. This frees us from the burden of trying to understand and control everything on our own, knowing that there are mysteries only he can reveal. Solomon, reflecting on the futility and limitations of wisdom without God, warns us about the risk of being consumed by anxiety when we try to comprehend all the complexities of the world. knowledge without divine guidance can easily lead to discouragement and frustration as we are confronted with the reality of imperfection and the transience of human existence. In contrast, Psalm 111:10 tells us that the true beginning of wisdom comes when we recognize our limitations and seek guidance from God. Here, wisdom is not just about accumulating information or understanding the complexities of life, but about obeying God's commandments, which are eternal and unshakable. By practicing the Lord's commandments, we gain deeper understanding that not only enlightens our minds, but also brings peace to our spirits. This wisdom is not exhausting or frustrating. It is transformative, leading us to trust in God, live in harmony with His will, and find purpose in our actions. The praise of the Lord, which belongs to Him forever, is an expression of gratitude for this divine wisdom that transcends the limitations of human knowledge. Therefore, the reflection on Psalm 111:10, in parallel with Ecclesiastes 1:18, teaches us that true wisdom is not in the mere accumulation of knowledge, but in understanding that divine wisdom is the foundation of all true comprehension. When we seek to know more, we must do so with the fear and obedience to God, recognizing that He is the source of all wisdom, and through His guidance we find not only understanding but also peace, purpose, and joy. Se voca gastu des video, now se esqueca de curtir, y de se inscriver no canal, para acompanhar mais contado como est. Sua participação é muito importante para nós. Que dias abençoe sua vida.